Hello, BUIDL. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here with Pedro, Charles, Firat. And let me introduce myself. My name is Josh Lee. I'm a co-founder at Keplr Wallet and Osmosis. And I mostly contribute to various products in the Cosmos ecosystem. And it's my pleasure to moderate a panel about cross-chain things, which happens to be one of my passions, and to have brilliant people here. Do you guys want to do a quick intro of yourselves?
So, hi, my name is Pedro. I'm the founder of WalletConnect and director of the WalletConnect Foundation. And WalletConnect connects many, many wallets in the space, including Keplr, across multiple chains. And yeah, happy to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Charles. I'm one of the co-founders of Espresso Systems. We work on Espresso, which is a confirmation layer. What does that mean? Basically, any chain or rollup that uses Espresso can get a very fast confirmation that the transaction, that any transaction is final within just a few seconds. This is very, very important for security. It's also very, very important for interop, especially as there's thousands and thousands of rollups coming online. So yeah, I'm sure I'll talk more, so I'll leave it at that.
Hi everyone, my name is Firat. I'm one of the co-founders of MoreMarkets. What we essentially do is we allow dormant assets that are not really active on DeFi right now, such as XRP, Doge, BTC, to be active on DeFi using a verticalized DeFi stack.
Yeah, so I think, I love breaking things down into things that are easier to understand. And I think one of the kind of common things that happen when people talk about cross-chain things is like, hey, there's a lot of benefits to cross-chain things that are told, but there's also drawbacks. And I think all of us admit that there are issues there. And one of the common things that are cited is obviously fragmentation. And just for context, when I heard I was going to be moderating this panel, I was really excited to hear we have 3 different guests or panelists who are tackling the fragmentation, which I think is a very broad, undefined issue, into like 3 distinct characteristics, right? So I feel like for you, you're trying to tackle this like multi-chain wallet usability, a lot of the front end, like the end user fragmentation. For you guys, there's the consensus and interoperability, and how do you make bridging or much beyond bridging, right, faster, and then for you liquidity. So yeah, I thought that was kind of a cool point for this panel. And yeah, before we even kind of dive in deeper, I want to do kind of a kind of positioning check, right? And I have a kind of a list of questions to better understand where each of the panelists stand. So a few yes or no questions. And one is, I think, pretty simple. One is, do you believe that more chains generally mean more problem? And maybe you can go one by one.
I don't believe that more chains are going to introduce more problems. I believe that the way chains are currently designed causes the problems.
Okay.
And it could be as simple as like, how do they actually read balances? How do they actually do confirmations, for example? So the chain design has to be rethought a little bit. It's not the problem that we have too many chains. If anything, we don't have enough chains.
Interesting. Okay. Charles?
Unfortunately, I do believe that more chains means more problems, and that's what we're trying to fix. I think the reality is that anyone can spin up a chain by clicking just one button right now, and it's happening. It's the reality, and that brings a ton of problems with moving assets around, liquidity, capital inefficiency, untrusted sequencers causing security weaknesses, slower and slower bridging. All these problems are a result of more chains. However, that is the reality, and I think it's what we're focused on solving. So I don't think it's a problem that we can't have more chains. It's just the reality.
Firat?
Mine's both. It is a problem.
No, you have to choose one.
I think it's a problem from a technical standpoint, from an interrupt standpoint.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think market inefficiencies also create markets. So it creates more liquidity. It creates more arbitrage opportunities. So for liquidity, even if it's fragmenting, then there's opportunities for the arbitrageurs and everyone to have more chains in place, actually.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. I guess the second kind of positioning question would be, I think this is kind of a commonly held belief, maybe not, but there's this debate on, hey, monolithic's still going to win because monolithic's going to scale fast enough to keep up with demand. Do you believe that? And then on the opposite side of things, the belief is that, hey, yes, the current landscape of cross-chain ecosystems have a lot of issues that we're discussing right now, and ultimately these will get solved, and going cross-chain is the only way to keep up with demand. Which position do you which camp do you consider yourself to fall into?
Well, I find it very hard to believe in anything monolithic, because if that was true, there would be like one country in the world. And even if you're talking about blockchains, like Solana has tried to be monolithic, and if it had succeeded, there wouldn't be any other versions of Solana. And that's not true. There's tons of SVM chains now, and they exist for a reason. It's not just to capturing value. They actually were limited by multiple factors, that they actually wanted Solana to be different, so they spin up their own versions. And this is in a very small market. What happens if this market is 10x or 100x? It's impossible to keep everything in one chain.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that, Pedro. I think not only is it impossible to sustain the demand with just one system, especially if you wanted it to be sufficiently decentralized, I think every application has its own needs. I think, for instance, take Ethereum, right? Ethereum is an extremely decentralized, extremely neutral platform, but it's also quite expensive. It would not be suitable for high throughput applications. But there are certain applications like, maybe multi-million-dollar lending or real-world assets that belong on Ethereum. There may be different requirements on execution environment. You may want EVM, you may want SVM, you may want app-specific. Not to mention all the different incentives to spin up your own chain if you are an application. For instance, to keep the priority fees or the sequencing fees. So I think the reality is there are going to be thousands of chains. That's the big bet that Espresso is making, and we're trying to solve the frictions that come with that.
I do agree with both of you that,
Nice.
to be fair, I wish there was a way to just have one monolithic chain so that all liquidity would live there and we would happily live, and then we can have flash loans whenever we want. But the reality is that there's always going to be a trade-off between how much customization people want, what the developers want. I don't think the users care that much, to be fair, but the developers will have different preferences, so there will always be more than one chain, just because of that reason, not even just scaling reasons.
Yeah, I guess that's another good point where maybe scaling is one of the factors, but there's many more reasons outside of scaling to build your own chain.
There's also the innovation aspect, right? Because, it's very hard for us to kind of not repeat the mistakes of the past internet. But the initial internet was a bunch of portals, and everyone tried to put everything in one portal. The news, the entertainment and everything. So visiting the internet was going to one portal, and they just tried to improve that portal. But then again, it would have one company build what is the vision of the internet. It didn't really make sense. It was only when everyone started spinning off their own websites and apps that the internet was really born. So it's really the same thing for blockchains. The innovation only started once this multi-chain world started. If you go back 4 years ago and we had 4 or 5 chains, it wasn't really that fun.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Last kind of positioning question I had was, 10 years from now, do you still feel like EVM will be the dominant smart contracting environment /VM?
I'm a JavaScript engineer, so I already lost respect by saying that, because everyone just look at me, oh, he doesn't know how to code. But JavaScript is the biggest programming language in the world, but it's not the best. It's literally not the best. Everyone who writes JavaScript knows that it's not a great programming language, but it works, and it has onboarded more developers than any other programming language. And that's exactly what EVM is. It's the JavaScript of blockchains. It's not great, it's okay, but it works.
I agree.
Yeah.
For me, the point of Solidity in EVM is that the fact that it is very high portability, so you can just do it once and then you can deploy multiple chains. And just because it's kind of a network effect at this point to use. I'm a Rust engineer myself. I also write Solidity, but I would say as long as there's not an easier way to port these things, I think it's going to be here for the next 10 years.
Interesting. I feel like this answer might have been different about 2 or 3 years ago, and I feel like this year was when I feel like the consensus has been, all right, EVM at this point is unstoppable. Just kind of curious because, one of the biggest incentives to potentially have multiple chains is multiple environments, and, we're saying, hey, this will sort of still be the trend. It will be other things outside of the VM that could be what's attractive to build multiple
There's
chains.
one important point to that too, because especially in the age of vibe coding, AI,
Yeah.
and all that thing, the more content you have out there, the more code that you can generate. Yeah. So it kind of like snowballs the effect of one language even further and further and further, and also allows for these smart contracts to be, I wouldn't say more robust because you're using AI. Eventually, yes, also formal verification. But that's one factor that I would even make it more network effect, go the usage of EVM.
And I wanted to add one interesting thing. I always compare these blockchain virtual machines to programming languages because it's so similar. For example, there's always this debate between Rust and Go and which one is the best. And when the discussions are about these two programming languages, they study the actual programming languages benefits, but they forget everything that comes with it. Rust is great, but what Rust has even better is Cargo, which is this whole ecosystem of modules where everyone is just building components for Rust. If you try to do that with Go or Python, Jesus, it's so different. Even if these programming languages were technically better, the ecosystem is not good enough. And that's one of the things that JavaScript has really well, which is it's a terrible programming language with an amazing ecosystem when anyone can build a component and another developer can use it, improve it, and build on top of it. The composability creates this strong network effect. And the EVM has that, which is it doesn't even matter if it's a good EVM at this point, but the ecosystem is really strong around it.
Yeah, all great answers. My follow-up question, I think, would be kind of, taking advantage of the fact that we have 3 different teams solving 3 different layers. What are the problems that exist in sort of this fragmented cross-chain environment that you or your team has identified? Dive in deep into that, explain the context,
Sure, yeah, I can start. I think Espresso, probably out of the 3 projects here, is probably at the lowest level. Josh, as you mentioned, it's has to do with consensus. Fundamentally, the problems we identified have to do with the fact that most of the chains being spun up right now are rollups that are operated by a single centralized sequencer. I gave a talk at Seoul about this a couple days ago, but I'll repeat it. Basically, the problem is that pretty much every rollup, ranging from a big one like Arbitrum 1 to the long tail of rollups, there are thousands now. We're working with many. Rari Chain is using Espresso, for instance, Ape Chain, App Chain. Pretty much, there's probably hundreds of rollups. Maybe a user will trust the sequencer of Arbitrum 1, but you may not want to trust the sequencer of a smaller chain. Anyways, let me go to talk about what a sequencer does, right? A sequencer is basically the party that decides which transactions that users have submitted to include in a block and what is the ordering. Now, if the sequencer is dishonest or if the sequencer is hacked, they can't steal your funds, but they can still cause billions of dollars of damage, right? Imagine a user deposits on Arbitrum 1 $10 million into Upbit, and then Upbit credits the deposit, and the user swaps it all to USDT and then withdraws it on some other chain. And then the Arbitrum1 sequencer is maybe just hacked for just an hour. They revert that before it's settled to Ethereum. That's instantly tens of millions of dollars of losses. So that is a security problem. But that security problem also has to do with interop, because you have all these bridges that allow you to transfer assets between chains, right? So if anyone has used Across or used Layer 0, these bridges all have different designs. But essentially what they're doing is they're relying on a confirmation that, let's say you want to bridge from Arbitrum to Optimism. Basically what you're doing is you're locking assets into Arbitrum, and then it's being minted on Optimism once Optimism is certain that the transaction on Arbitrum is final. The problem is finality right now only happens in like perhaps hours. We're trying to lower that to seconds. But basically this security issue is causing bridging and all sorts of interop to be very slow and also quite expensive. Across is charging a lot of basis points for just a simple bridge, and that could be improved significantly. So, anyways, those are the problems that we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
So, I feel like I'm bottom up, the consensus on liquidity and then the user and the front ends.
So the problem that we identified is that we look at stuff as assets, not really chains. So because we're like one, let's say.
I fully agree on this.
Yeah. And there are some assets that are kind of trapped in some chains and they cannot leave, but they have like huge market caps. There's these XRP, Bitcoin. It's very difficult to get them out of the like natively, but they should be also used as, or the users want to earn these assets. And until now, there's been multiple technologies that have been tried, and now we're seeing with TEs and MPC that these assets can be non-custodially moved from one chain to another. So what we're trying to solve is to get these assets to be utilized in DeFi, not on their native chain for these assets, but on different chains where they can, when there's a more vibrant DeFi ecosystem.
And I guess quick follow-up on that, like why do you think users can't just do that directly, or like?
Because there's not enough liquid markets in those chains. There's not enough products being built on those chains. Ethereum, for example, is a very, very big DeFi hub, right? And these assets haven't really met Ethereum as the DeFi hub because of many reasons. I think we also call it a little bit of like people don't see these assets as native to their chain in Ethereum, so they don't really look at them as a secure collateral to get loan against, for example. So we want to change that. It's a perception issue, it's a technology issue, and it's a liquidity issue.
Yeah.
And I like how we actually progressed the conversation because it went from like consensus to liquidity and now user interface. And we've been trying to fix like chain abstraction and WalletConnect, and there's very little that we can do other than just like sugarcoat it because like there's like fundamental problems like the consensus and liquidity. But I like what you said about becoming more asset centric, right? The more we start viewing as chains as independent from assets, then we can actually tackle chain abstraction like on a completely different mindset. And because we still have this concept where an asset is native to a single chain, it's just slowing down like completely the chain abstraction. And it was USDC, because it's such a centralized asset, that actually took the first step because, they're a centralized issuer. It's one company. So they just decided, USDC doesn't live anywhere. We control where USDC lives. And they just mint and burn the token in different chains and have like one central point of truth. But there's a lot of tokens out there that don't have that capacity. And now that like WalletConnect has launched our own token, we actually faced this problem. And we ended up like working with Wormhole to fix this problem, which is instead of having like one chain where the token lives, it's going to live everywhere. And now we're actually preparing to launch on Solana as well, thanks to this partnership. But this kind of also taught us, from a perspective of a token issuer, the problems that we need to solve for the wallets, which is we need to really change how wallets work. There's no concept of like the wallet is connected on chain A or chain B. Like this this thing should just disappear. The app is connected to a chain. The concept of the chain is for applications. The concept for the wallet is accounts and assets, period.
Yeah. I guess on to take the kind of counter position, just for the sake of, the discussion, I think there's a belief that there's a trade-off, right? Where, all right, you can simplify things, make it easier, but you may be, hiding some of the risk that exists in having multiple bridges with different security properties, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what's your take on, like, all right, how do we do better in that, where we balance out, risk controls, but also not at the expense of just bad UX?
But the bad UX, specifically for bridging, as you mentioned, like, yes, we're abstracting more and more the bridging, we're hiding the risks, users believe their assets are equally, like, secure in different chains, but this was problematic because the token issuer, who actually minted the token, did not have control over this. They deployed the token in one chain, and every time it moves between different bridges, it has different security properties. If we, as a token issuer, if we all bring back and redeploy the tokens, and we become the controller of the liquidity, then we are assessing the risk ourselves, right? We're not letting the user just go to random bridges where, the same token can exist in different flavors. Instead, like, the token issuer decides the minting and the burning, and then the risk is associated with each asset. So, for example, maybe token A has more risk than token B, but that's the decision of the token issuer, right? It's not the decision of, oh, I just happened to bridge on this bridge and I don't know what happened.
Anything to add, Firat or Charles? Okay.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
So the question is, should we hide the security risks, or like what is the? I think it's a very like software engineered. How secure is secure?
Yeah.
Right. Like where do we stop, and where do we draw the line between security and the UX? I believe security is a spectrum, and like for your $10, how much security do you want? For your $1 million, how much security do you want? Do you want to wait for Ethereum finality to confirm your transaction if it's $1 million? If it's $10, are you okay with reconfirmations? So I believe that it really depends on what asset you're transferring, what amount you're transferring, how much time do you need to get the confirmation, who you're transferring to. So there's a bunch of different things. How to solve this on the UX layer, I think it's not really that easy.
Yeah.
Because then you have to kind of reveal everything to the user, and they don't want to know. But again, it really depends on what kind of action you're taking on chain.
Yeah. And I think that, like, whole software engineer problem, like, I completely relate, because designers would be like, hey, WBTC and this bridge BTC, like, why can't we just call it both BTC, right? And then the crypto engineer is like, of course you can't call these two things the same thing. And there's always that, balance between the two, and, so it's just kind of curious.
BTC is a special case, but yes,
Yeah.
that one would never change. Like for
Yeah,
other tokens,
and where does the line sort of stop,
Where
right?
do you stop, right? Where do you...
well, that's basically my first point, which is like it's up to the token issuer, and we all know that the token issuer of BTC, who is no longer with us, or maybe it is, but it's quiet, will not make changes to how it is. So we will never be able to rebrand WBTC to BTC because that's the token issuer's responsibility to take on that risk. And WBTC is technically BitGo, right? So it's not really the original issuer. You can't do a USDC upgrade like it happened where Circle just decided to upgrade to be cross-chain, right, with BTC.
Yeah. Cool. I guess we're about 5-6 minutes left, but one of the things I think, as I reflect on, trying to standardize cross-chain technology, interoperability technology, and, being someone who's building a wallet, I found it fascinating that, like, bridging hasn't really been standardized yet. There's multiple different types of consensus, different types of virtual machines. thought it was fascinating for you, Pedro, where WalletConnect was one of the few like true standards that sort of exist no matter what ecosystem you're in, no matter what wallet you're in. Kind of curious, like why do you think that happened?
Because I'm very stubborn, and basically we had this massive upgrade in 2023 where there was the old WalletConnect and the new WalletConnect, and everyone was really upset at me on 2023 because I gave them like 6 months, because I've been talking about this upgrade for like 2 years, but they didn't do anything about it. So I just started this countdown, and if you actually go to 2023, my Twitter account was basically just showing the countdown every week. And then when the day came, like people rushed like the last week to do the upgrade because they didn't think I was serious. Like, I'm gonna shut down the old WalletConnect and you have to use the new WalletConnect. And because of this very aggressive approach, which made me some enemies for sure, it definitely helped push standard. And that's why I've tweeted recently, like, this problem of bridges in EVM, it's actually not a technological problem, it's a leadership problem. Like, whoever's in charge just needs to call the shots and just say, do as I say, or be upset about it, and just say, this is going to be the bridging system. And for example, in Cosmos, like, I know there's a little bit of fragmentation now, but at the beginning, IBC was like very standard, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like today, but in the beginning it was great, right? Because there was like a very consistent voice saying, this is IBC, everyone is going to do this, follow it, or, you know, be outside of the thing, you know? There's nothing in that for EVM, and that's a problem. Someone needs to speak up, and it has to be someone very high up in Ethereum to just say, this is going to be the bridging system, and be upset, but this is my opinion.
Do you guys agree?
I think there's some good initiatives, like, you know, Open Intents Framework. There's many projects, including Espresso, contributing. You know, across one of the biggest LP-based bridges is contributing. So I think there's progress made, but I think I would generally agree with that. Yeah.
I'm not sure if like somebody from up can say that. That's not really in the spirit of Ethereum, right?
I agree
somebody
with that,
cannot
yeah.
come and say. But on the other side, who will decide is distribution. Who holds the distribution can force, basically. That's kind of what you did, right? You hold distribution, you said, hey guys, like, I'm shutting it down. So whoever holds the biggest distribution right now can basically come and kind of bully the rest and say, this is the standard, and if you guys are not using, then this will not work. I don't know who holds the biggest distribution right now in bridges, but that could happen.
I mean, I'm a bit biased, but I do think wallets have a pretty significant say in this
yeah,
as well.
Wallets,
right?
wallets,
yeah.
Exactly. Because like that's the top of the funnel, right?
Yeah.
You kind of hold the distribution. So again, yeah, the market decides at the end of the day, and wallets are like the top of the funnel. So
I would like to believe that it's already true, but it's not, in my opinion, because eventually markets will be stronger than influential people. But Ethereum did not have rollups. Like, it had the concept of rollups, but it did not have this explosion of rollups until this website, and maybe you're familiar with it, it's called vitalik.eth.limo, had one blog post that said rollup-centric vision. And 6 months later, everyone had a rollup.
Yep.
Then in wallets, account abstraction was like, before it was called meta transactions, and there was like tons of people building account abstraction for years. Like, they spent their careers building this. And then he goes into one Telegram chat and says, we're going to do 7702. And now we have account abstraction, period. That's it. Like, that's how it happens. Like, it was that simple. Like, so that influence still exists, and I think it can be used for good. And examples of this, going back into history, is Linux. Like, Linux is a dominant operating system that powers servers everywhere, and it has one very opinionated guy that decides what goes into Linux and what doesn't go into Linux. Is that a good power or not? Well, he uses it for good so far. It has worked. So it's a concept in software called benevolent dictatorship, and sometimes it's important to have that leadership.
Yeah, that's cool. Just to wrap up, final question for you, Pedro. I believe there's a token called WalletConnect token that just got launched, and it's going live for on a Korean exchange. What is WalletConnect token, and Can you sort of explain?
Yeah, so
what that does?
WalletConnect has existed for 7 years, and it started as open source projects, but back in 2018, I was telling people to run nodes, and nobody ran nodes. Then I ended up running all the nodes, and then we started a company that ran the WalletConnect nodes. And then we realized that we grew way too much to have one company control this. So last year, we announced the WalletConnect Foundation, and we launched the WalletConnect token. Now we have 60 node operators. And yesterday, we launched WalletConnect token on all exchanges, and just a couple of hours up, it also announced the listing. So I'm really happy with this milestone, and now WalletConnect is decentralized. It took 7 years, though.
And when you say decentralized, it's the network that's relaying these messages?
The token economics are running. We have staking, governance, rewards. The only missing piece is the fees.
Gotcha. Cool. I think that's it for us. Yeah.
Well, you don't have a token now.
When we upgrade to proof of stake, there will be a token.
You should share about the Espresso roadmap.
Yeah.
Yeah, so well, right now Espresso is already on mainnet. In fact, there are rollups using Espresso mainnet. It's, however, permissioned. It's run by 100 nodes, run by around 10 institutional validators, including like Blockdaemon, Kudasai, Figment. But we plan to upgrade to proof of stake. The Espresso Foundation was announced a couple months ago, and Hotshot, which is the consensus underlying Espresso that provides the fast finality. It's actually designed to be able to scale to hundreds, even thousands of nodes without much performance degradation. So the ultimate goal is to even mirror the security, the economic security of Ethereum and the level of decentralization, just with a different property, specifically the very, very fast finality. So that's our roadmap.
So there is a foundation.
Oh, do you want me to?
Yeah, if you want to.
Well, we're no token yet. We are very close to launching an internal mainnet, which basically says we deploy everything on mainnet, test everything out, and then roll out the public mainnet. There's a timer on the website. You can check. It's moremarkets.xyz, because I think there's another MoreMarkets. Yeah, go check it out. There's docs explaining what we're trying to do, what we're doing, and the app is also going to be live very soon.
Yeah, awesome. And if history's a lesson in history, I think there's always a lot of opportunities in great products that doesn't have a token yet. And
What about Keplr?
I can't say anything. But yeah. So thank you all. This I think wraps up our panel. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.